Chapter 73. For a minute I considered going home to my castle in Hueco Mundo and just brood, maybe sleep with Galatea and Astrid to clear my mind of Deathstroke's final request. But I just took a deep breath and like a man shoved my mental conflict under the bus as I pushed my Garganta and Traveler Essence to break past the natural magical barriers around Infinity Island. Where is the little demon head? I pondered as I flew over the island pinging my Pesquisa until I found a particularly powerful and if anything, aged soul. Thankfully my entrance into Infinity Island wasn't noticed at least yet, as even ninjas apparently don't bother looking up into the sky of their magically defended island. Which allowed me to easily evade the anti-air machine guns probably in place to shoot down the League flyers or perhaps Batman's jet as I silently flew towards the powerful soul I felt in the distance. When I arrived at the large castle-like structure, I just climbed through an open slit in the roof that they probably literally left for their own ninjas to escape or enter as I dropped down into a grand hall filled with ninjas and 4 people of interest to me of sorts. Ra's al Ghul, Talia al Ghul, and... yeah, the rest of you don't matter, I spoke as I cracked my neck as I stared down Ra's al Ghul. Talia, you got 2 options now. Walk your little ass to the docks or a teleporter, and be a good little retired mother for Damien. Or I pull your head from your shoulders, and I use your head as a morning star to bludgeon your father to death. I spoke duly as only my respect for Batman prevented me from killing her outright. Hell, the only reason I didn't just level the island with a series of zeros was the very young child-age souls along with wanting to pick up Slade's daughter Rose. Walking away from my father's inevitable death would be wrong of me, Jake Barris. She said, trying to sound confident, but her very soul quivered at the knowledge that fucking with me was a true death sentence as I killed my foes down to their very souls so no little Lazarus pits for them to resurrect from. Alright, 1 trip to the hospital. I shrugged as with a sonido I flashed in front of her and with a single jab of my fist I shattered her solar plexus and probably several ribs as she was smashed into the stone wall behind her and even cracking it with the impact. So, am I the last of the light, Jake? Ra's al Ghul asked conversationally as he only paid a single glance at his daughter and looked relieved as she curled up to control her breathing and not exacerbate her injuries. Nope, I still need to go about throwing Luther into the sun. Or actually throwing him into a volcano would be a fitting death for him with how much he adores and relies on technology, I responded as Ubu and Sensei advanced on me. Ra's al Ghul actually laughed at my thoughtful idea, like a full-on hearty laugh as shook his head. Yes, Lord, that would be a fitting death for him. But I am afraid I will not die so easily. Get him. Ra's al Ghul yelled, and in a beautiful display of skill Sensei and Ubu attempted to strike my neck with knife hands while Ra's al Ghul attempted to put his Arabian sword through my heart. But it was for naught. You know, I typically don't use this part of my powers as it just isn't that useful against people on my own level of strength. But against jumpy little ninjas with too much martial skill, it's perfect. I spoke aloud as my white hair flowed out from my head like a tidal wave and picked up all 3 assassins before the hairs on Ubu and Sensei tensed and the hairs coated in razor-sharp wind blades blended them like a watermelon being put in a high-powered blender. Hack. Ra's al Ghul coughed to the side as the threads of my hair bound him tightly to the point where he was having trouble breathing even with his lesser key nonsense. You do realize that I will be brought back at some point, right? I always am, even if it's a couple of centuries later. I am inevitable after all, haha. He spoke proudly and I just shrugged. Not my problem, I am merely tearing the light apart to absolve myself of karma and my own motives. Now tell me where Rose Wilson is, and I will leave you with an intact corpse so whichever crony can resurrect you easier later on. I spoke as honestly, I didn't hate Ra's al Ghul all the much. Sure, he was an eco-terrorist and whatever, but I literally eat souls, so if he was able to resurrect from me blasting his soul to oblivion, more power to him. As my only vendetta was against the light as a whole, not its individual members, except Vandal Savage. Ah. He grumbled before snorting, shaking his head. Whatever, I know you have a sensory technique, so I won't spite you and push you to tear apart my body in holdings in search of her. He spoke lightly despite the threads of hair tightening around his neck at his flippancy. She along with Madame Shiva and her daughter are teaching the new recruits in the southern section of the island. He explained, and my eye twitched at hearing about Cassandra Cain. I guess I get to drop another kid off on Batman. I thought numbly as I gathered my spiritual energy, and then as I laid a palm on the brow of the bound Ra's al Ghul's head I fully unleashed the concentrated power of my spiritual energy, and Ra's al Ghul's soul resisted for a moment before being sundered under my own soul's power, making his hollow form droop in the grasp of my hairs before I just dropped him to the ground. I began floating into the air about to head to the southern section of the island, but I felt a heavy gaze upon me, and I looked back to see Talia al Ghul staring at me with clearly murderous intentions. Wipe those dreams out of your empty little head, girl. If I see you again and you are still being a criminal, I will kill you regardless of your connection to Batman. I warned her, uncaring of whatever little dreams of revenge she may have. She wasn't a threat, nor was she even capable of getting at those that I cared for, as they were literally in another realm, and she had no magical methods of getting there. She was no threat to me, but if she proves an annoyance, I will deal with her all the same. Plus, it's not like this is the first time in the last year that Ra's al Ghul's had bit off more than he could chew and needed to be brought back to life. I then flew out of the castle towards the docks to pick up Rose Wilson and maybe even drop off Cassandra Cain with Batman, as even if I swore to give Rose some options in what she wanted to do. Cassandra was a no-go for me due to her mental issues, so I was simply incapable and unwilling to deal with fixing her so she can actually talk.